I'm great. I can end emails really well. I can't end live talking well at all.
No, no, that was wonderful. It was great.
Are you nostalgic, a parent, or perhaps a child at heart? When it comes to children's media, from books to TV shows, and even movies, there's often more than meets the eye. Is it well written? Does it still hold up today? What works and what doesn't? Or maybe you wonder what went on behind the scenes of that work. Together, a trio of adults who are also kids at heart will critique and comment on one piece of children's media each episode.
Hello, this is Eric.
Hi, I'm PJ.
And I'm Rico. You're listening to Beyond the Lens, a family-friendly podcast. Okay, welcome to another exciting new episode of Beyond the Lens. I am joined by PJ.
Hello.
And this is Rico. Unfortunately, due to scheduling difficulties, Eric is not going to be able to join us today.
Aw.
But we will move forward, and because of the chosen topic that I alluded to at the end of the last episode, which was Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and PJ not being entirely familiar with that series, we are going to preempt that to the next time so that hopefully we'll have a much more better, thorough discussion that way. So, moving on to a pick by PJ. So, what show are we discussing this week?
So this week we're going to be talking about a beloved childhood show that I think most people have heard of. If you honestly haven't heard of the show, I'm very concerned for you. It's a show called Sesame Street. And we've actually mentioned Sesame Street before, but we didn't really go into too much detail. So I'm pretty excited to talk about this show again. Rico, I think I already know your answer, but how familiar are you with Sesame Street?
I would say that I'm pretty familiar. I've watched Sesame Street at a much older age than the target demographic than I would like to admit, but I haven't watched it in recent years apart from the one when they introduced Julia for obvious reasons.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about Julia later on, of course. But okay, Sesame Street is one of the longest running TV shows of all time. Just this year, the show celebrated 50 years of being on the air. In fact, my mom also grew up with this show as well. So this program has been a part of many generations, and I'm sure many more generations to come. The show has over 4,500 episodes and counting, and it centers around these characters called Muppets, and there's some human characters in the show as well. Just to name a few Muppets, we have Big Bird, the big yellow bird, Elmo, the red monster, who's probably the most recognizable from the show. We also have Oscar the Grouch, Bert and Ernie, Cookie Monster. I mean, the list goes on with all of these characters. And I'm sure, again, we'll go into detail about these characters anyways, because there's Julia that we're going to talk about for obvious reasons, as you'll find out later on. As for the human characters, there are also many on the show. Some notable people include longtime cast members Alan, Dr. Gina Jefferson, and Bob Johnson. The last two left the show due to the show, I think, rebranding or something. But Alan's still there, and he's one of my favorites on the show, too. And in addition to those human characters, and I love this part, Sesame Street does not use child actors for the human children on the show. They are everyday kids who are naturally reacting to everything around them, and it's awesome. In terms of what the show is all about, as you may have known or have already figured it out, these characters live on a street called Sesame Street, and the main goal of the show is to teach preschoolers the basics such as reading, math, life skills in general, etc. There's also occasionally some adult humor in the show, and this was intended for parents, babysitters, and other adults that are watching Sesame Street with a child, so they don't become bored or uninterested watching the program. I think that's very clever. But still, this is by far one of the most popular children's shows of all time. It has been estimated that 86 million Americans have watched the show during their childhood. It is still very popular today. You can easily walk into a kids section at a grocery store and see the Sesame Street characters everywhere. The show has also won 189 Emmy Awards, which is the most of any TV show, and 11 Grammy Awards. So now we get to what happens on the show. It revolves around live action, sketch comedy, animation, and puppetry. From what I remember, no episode of Sesame Street has the exact same structure. It's basically like watching reality TV, except it's with a bunch of puppets and there's a bunch of transitions from different segments. But Rico, is there something in particular you like about Sesame Street? Does something about the show stand out to you?
I think they're not afraid to shy away from hard subject matters. Granted, we were not around when this happened, but I was able to find it on YouTube. There's a place in the show called Hooper's Store.
Mm-hmm.
And in the beginning, it was run by, of course, someone named Mr. Hooper. And then when the actor who played Mr. Hooper died unexpectedly, they did not shy away from the fact instead of casting someone new or letting him out of the show another way, they actually had his character die as well. And so then there's this episode where Big Bird's sort of finding out what death is sort of like, and they don't shy away from it in that sense.
Yeah, that is one thing I really like about the show. And it's kind of similar to, I just recently saw a clip on YouTube too, actually, right before we started recording. There was this clip of Bert and Ernie who were trying to sleep, and Ernie kept like asking for a glass of water, and Bert kept getting angry, he kept getting really angry and like, hey, I really don't want to do this, but okay, I'll do it anyway. You know, if it were any other show, I think, you know, the characters would have been like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll do this for you. They're all friendly and stuff. But Bert and Ernie have never been afraid to, like, you know, get mad at each other. Well, mostly Bert getting angry at Ernie for, you know, reasons that most friends would get angry at each other for. So it's also cool to see Sesame Street not shy away from that. And like you said, kind of making difficult subjects easier to talk about. And it's going to be similar when we bring up Julia later on. But that is another thing I really appreciate about the show. Now, in terms of my favorite segment, I really liked Elmo's World. I think it's a cool and funny segment that stands out from the others. You have the theme song that's really catchy, Elmo's Goldfish, and Mr. Noodle, a human character who also made an appearance sometimes too. That was my favorite thing on the show. And then we get to the many spin-off shows with shows that are extremely popular. Sesame Street has also had a handful of spin-off shows. One of them being Play With Me Sesame, which aired from 2002 to 2007, so not very long. It was definitely more of a Generation Z show too. But as I'm the beginning of Gen Z, it was definitely an entertaining show for me. Rico, are you familiar at all with Play With Me Sesame?
Vaguely. I mean, I've maybe seen one or two episodes, but it wasn't something that I really watched or anything.
Okay, it was a really great show. So it aired on Noggin, which wasn't as popular as Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network and other kids' networks at the time. But then I think it actually rebranded to Nick Jr. anyway. So anyway, it was much different from Sesame Street. You didn't have all the characters. It was mainly just Grover, Bert and Ernie, and Prairie Dawn. And I think some of the other characters occasionally made a guest appearance, but I can't really remember. But this show was more centered around being silly and being active, more so making kids feel happy and energetic. And instead of it being filmed on Sesame Street, it was filmed around different segments. So there was a segment similar to Simon Says called Ernie Says, a segment where Prairie Dawn showed off kids' artwork or played music. So more of a creative segment. And then there was even a segment where they played an online game that you could play in real life too. Definitely centered for Gen Z kids. Growing up, I had a ton of exposure to online games like Postopia, based on Post serials, online Barbie games, Polly Pocket games, you name it, I probably played it. This show also had a side platform for online games, I don't know if it's still there or if it's archived, but if you went to noggin.com, you could also play the same games they were playing on the show. And I remember it being the coolest thing ever. I'm like, hey, we're playing the same game. This is awesome. So a lot of computer games and video games in general were a huge part of my childhood, and to see like Sesame Street incorporate that too and kind of keep up with the times was really cool, because that's another amazing thing this show does, is that they always keep up with the times, and I think that's why, you know, they've been able to be on the air for so long too. Did you have, or Rico, did you play any online games growing up?
Not really, but I did play a few online games on the Zoom and Fetch website on pbskids.org. But other than that, I didn't really play many online games.
Yeah, I actually think I played some games on PBS too, but it was so long ago. But yeah, I just really appreciate how, again, the show is able to kind of incorporate that and, again, keep up with the times, because they've done a bunch of other stuff too. I just can't think of them off the top of my head, where they've made like, or they've had that connection with the audience. So I really appreciate that about the show too. It was that online touch that made it feel more personal than Sesame Street. I actually think I watched Play With Me Sesame more than I did the regular show, or the regular Sesame Street. So I really liked that show a lot. It was awesome, and I loved it so much. And I'm sad that it didn't last as long as I thought it would, because it did really good because it was on a network that wasn't as popular. But I don't remember the reason why the show didn't, or got canceled or whatever. But yeah, it was a great show. And of course, there were many movies and sideshows produced as well. I remember 2 of those, which I'm sure are only scratching the surface of all the side DVDs and stuff. One of them being the 1985 movie Follow That Bird, where Big Bird is sent to live with other birds, but he doesn't want to and ends up finding his way back to Sesame Street. And then there was a DVD I often watched as a kid called Elmo's Magic Cookbook, where Elmo also does a collaboration with actress Heather Headley and Chef Emeril Lagasse. I still remember the BAM segment where they make the pizza, and I always say it with them. And I'm pretty sure that's where my culinary interest got started. And it's still my favorite Sesame Street DVD. It's probably buried somewhere with all my other favorite DVDs from my childhood. Have you watched any of the other specials, Rico? And if so, which ones, or which one in particular is your favorite?
Well, I do have Follow That Bird recorded off air when it aired on one of the networks a long time ago. But honestly, one that I'm more familiar with, because I actually got like the retail VHS tape of it, is another movie. I think it was released theatrically. It was called The Adventures of Elmo and Grouchland.
I think I've heard of that one, yeah.
So I haven't seen it in a while, but basically it covers the story of Elmo, who loses his blanket in Oscar's trash can, and it gets thrown into a portal, which is in his trash can, to a place called Grouchland. And
that's right. I'm starting to remember now. Yeah.
Well, honestly, I think one of my favorite moments in recent memory from that is they had Bert and Ernie segments which isn't like a part of the story. It's mostly like they introduce the movie, they do the countdown, and then they stop and start it when Bert has a question or something. So, and then the other one is there's a scene where the other characters who are looking for Elmo are in Grouchland, and they ask a police officer for help, but it's against the law to ask for help in Grouchland. Why? I don't know, apart from it being a grouch. But then, after they're thrown in jail, the police officer reads a parody of the Miranda rights, which, if you watch any crime shows, that you're familiar with that. But this character says, "You have the right to scream your head off. If you should you give up the right to scream your head off, then someone who will scream their head off will be provided for you."
Yeah, Sesame Street has a habit of parodying a lot of things, including some of the characters. I think some of the characters are parodied after real life people. I know there's a character on the show who's parodied after Sherlock Holmes or something. And there's been many things on the show that have been parodied off, or I can't even say the word, has a parody of the original thing. But yeah, it's one of the other great things about the show. It's like one of those other adult things where only the adults would laugh at it and the kids are like, what? I don't know what's going on. Yeah, it's a great thing. Yeah, and I don't remember much of Follow That Bird. I just remember like watching it a lot as a kid. There was a lot of movies that I had on repeat as a kid, and Follow That Bird was one of them. And it's funny because there was only like literally 2 scenes I remember from that movie. That's the scene where Big Bird literally turns completely blue and he sings this song. I don't even remember. I think it's called I'm So Blue, but I can't remember the exact title. But he sings about wanting to go back home. And then there's another song in the film that involves Bert and Ernie up in an airplane and they're flying in an upside down world. And that song had me cracking up as a kid. I'd sing it all the time. So a lot of the songs from the show are very memorable too. Great soundtracks and everything. And in terms of Elmo's Magic Cookbook, also some great songs from that one. And again, loved the appearances of Heather Headley and Chef Emerald Lagasse on the show. And that DVD too was also on repeat for me as a kid. Really enjoyed that one. I mean, there's so many side things that Sesame Street has done, and it's going to take forever for someone to watch every single thing that they've made. But I don't think I've ever disliked anything that Sesame Street has done. It's one of those shows where it feels like family. It's like you know these characters so well, and you can relate to them and have fun with them. This is definitely a family show, and that's one of the things I love most about it too. Do you have a favorite character on the show, Rico?
I probably would have to say Elmo, because I also like the Elmo's World segment. But apparently Elmo was at least a somewhat new addition. I don't know when exactly it was added, because for those that don't know, I have an older brother and sister who were born like way before I was born, so there's a huge generation gap. And the younger of them, my brother, who really liked Grover growing up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Elmo, I think he was a later addition. The show started in 1969, and I think Elmo joined the cast in 1980 or 1980 something. So he's not a new character, but he is new enough for the older generations to not be as familiar with. I know my mom didn't really grow up with Elmo, but Elmo was one of my favorites growing up, and because his voice is so memorable too, and a lot of people parody Elmo. And I think Kevin Clash, the person who originally played Elmo, like just retired in 2013 or something, and now some other guy takes over and puppets Elmo and stuff. Mm-hmm. But he does a fantastic job too, and it's so funny trying to see everyone, do Elmo's voice, and a lot of people can do it so accurately. It's kind of funny. But yeah, he is a very memorable character, and he's one of my favorites too. My favorite character is definitely Elmo as well, but kind of tied with Julia, which we're going to talk about right now. One of Sesame Street's biggest goals is to celebrate diversity in every form, which I think is absolutely wonderful. You have Rosita the Monster, who was the first bilingual character on the show, and now we have Julia. So if you missed the pilot episode of Beyond the Lens, where we talked about one of Rico's favorite shows, Zoom, I don't remember how we brought her into the picture exactly, but we talked about the newest Muppet in Sesame Street, and that character is Julia. For those that don't know, Julia made headlines in 2015 when she debuted because she's the first Muppet who's not only autistic, but she's also the first Muppet who's disabled. And again, this is not just a huge step for Sesame Street. This is a major step in entertainment in general, because despite autism affecting around 1% of the population, we don't get a lot of accurate representation of the entire spectrum. And by we, I mean Rico and I. Both of us are actually autistic ourselves. And Sesame Street created Julia to reduce the stigma surrounding autism. Julia's puppeteer also has an autistic son, so she has a sense of what autism is like based on what she's seen in her son. So I want to pose this question to you, Rico, now. As an autistic person yourself, based on what you've seen, do you think Julia and her puppeteer are portraying autism more accurately?
I thought so, like when I first saw it, way back when like the episode first came out, they actually also put like the full episode on YouTube. I don't think it's there anymore. But,
Yeah, they took it down, I think.
But uh and I played it from YouTube to my mentor. So my mentor's son, who's autistic, and so when she saw it, she seemed to think that this is her words, not mine. She said that she portrayed Julia as a more severe case of autism than she would have liked, but honestly, I didn't have any problem with it.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I was going to say that one of my favorite things about Julia is that looking at her, it's like looking at myself when I was a kid. I still tear up when I watch her introduction episode. I think there is a 10-minute clip on YouTube. I think they took the original full episode down, but they put up the first 10 minutes of it. And I still watch it occasionally because some of the simple things that she does, like saying, play, 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 or holding her bunny fluffster closer to her. I did literally the exact same thing when I was a kid. I had a stuffed bunny myself, and one time I forgot to bring her on a trip. And my mom had to drive another hour round trip to bring her back to me because I was apparently not having it. I was having a meltdown. My bunny was my comfort item. And to see, Julia have her comfort item on the show as well, and it's literally another bunny, it makes me wish that I had Julia when I was a kid, because I always knew that I was different, but I didn't really know why. If I had seen Julia on my TV as a kid, I definitely would have felt less alone. I'm just really happy that Sesame Street has now brought Julia to life because, it is really hard to portray autism accurately. Like, I think I did mention this in the first episode too, where we talked about Julia for the first time, that there really isn't a 100% accurate way to portray autism. Some people are going to have communication problems. Some people are going to have no problems with that at all. Rico and I don't have the same quirks or the same traits. Everyone on the spectrum is different. But the way that they portray Julia, I think, is probably the closest that we've seen so far. Because, we have a lot of autistic people who have commented on the video on YouTube and have said, hey, I was exactly like that as a kid too. Or, hey, I have a sibling who's like that. Or I know someone who's like that. So I think, even though it's not 100% accurate, I think we're making great progress with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I really do think that this show has had an impact with how casting is made in Hollywood now too. Because in case you all didn't know, I'm an actress, and I had the opportunity to audition for a freeform show formerly known as ABC Family. It was a show called Everything is Gonna Be Okay. And one of the main characters in the show is autistic, and they were looking for an autistic actress to play her. And even though the role didn't go to me, I'm not even sad because it went to another actually autistic actress, and I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she did a great job with the character too. And I'm very happy that Hollywood and entertainment in general is becoming more open to, certain actors playing that character and having that character that they can relate to. It's just a wonderful thing to see, and we're making progress, people, and it's absolutely amazing. Yeah, so I would say that Elmo and Julia are kind of tied for my favorite characters, but I mean, I pretty much love every character on the show. They all have a distinguishable personality, and the voices to go along with it. The puppeteers and the actors who play them are extremely talented, and it's what makes this show extremely memorable, is just the characters and their personalities and the way the show is presented. It's, even as an adult watching the show occasionally, it's still pretty fun. And I still have I'm also a nanny, so I work with a lot of families who, play the show for their kids. And it's so nice to see, like, there's that one thing the kids the kids and I have in common, is that we've been watching the same show for all these years. And even when I was a kid, my mom was like, hey, I remember watching Snuffleupagus when I was a kid, or Big Bird. And we would talk about the characters all the time. It's one of those gems in the entire entertainment industry where, it can last for generations. And I just love this show so much.
One thing, this is more so a quick fact than anything. I didn't know this till I saw a few clips from older episodes of Sesame Street that are on YouTube. Did you know that originally Snuffleupagus was supposed to be Big Bird's imaginary friend?
I did know that, yes. I thought that was very interesting.
I didn't know until I saw those clips, because I was only familiar with the shows that were on when I was growing up, and by that point I think it was set that anyone could see him at that point. So I don't know how that happened, but it happened.
Yeah.
And then the second thing that I wanted to add about Julia, granted, I have not seen this episode or any of the episodes if there's more than one. I think it was this year they made headlines again about Julia because they were introducing other characters, other Muppets that were supposed to be like her family, to showcase the family dynamic.
Yes, I have seen that clip. They introduced her family about 3 months ago around what we know as Autism Acceptance Month. And her family consists of her parents, and I don't know if it's an older or younger brother, but she has a brother also. Older brother, yeah. So she has an older brother and a dog. And, nothing really stood out to me. They just seemed like, a normal family. And then there was Julia, who was kind of similar to how she was in her introductory episode. And she just was, like, pointing to things and, saying one specific word, like being clear about what she wanted and what she didn't. And it was very heartwarming. Like, I kind of had a similar situation, kind of like that when I was a kid. I have a younger sister, and she's neurotypical. My mom's neurotypical, so is my dad. So I was kind of like literally the odd one out in my family. So kind of seeing that, to me, it was very relatable. And another thing I forgot to add was that Julia was included in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade just last year, and she was wearing her noise-canceling headphones, which I thought was the nicest touch. Because I have noise-canceling headphones myself. I go to a lot of the Seahawks games. I'm a huge NFL fan, and I love watching my favorite team, the Seahawks, play, and I bring my noise-canceling headphones every time because it's more... I'm super sensitive to loud noises, and not everyone on the spectrum is super sensitive to loud noises. Sometimes it's very specific noises, but for me, like, crowd noises can definitely get to me sometimes. So seeing Julia, like, wear them at the parade, I just thought that was one of the most heartwarming things I've ever seen. So
yeah, I can speak that I used to be sensitive to loud noises. I sort of overcame that. Like, 3 triggers that come to me off the top of my head were fire alarms. So, and then certain flush toilets in public restrooms that are like really loud.
Oh yeah.
And when I was really, really younger, I also had a hard time with like eating in like a normal cafeteria. Like, I'd have to be in a quieter place. to eat because of all like the noise of people talking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think it was so weird because I was much different as a kid. Because autism, I mean, I can't speak for everyone on the spectrum. I can only speak for myself. But it gradually changed as I got older. When I was younger, I wasn't as sensitive to louder noises, but now my ears are obviously getting older. I'm becoming more sensitive to louder noises. My depression and anxiety came in around high school. And that kind of added on to that, pressure from just life in general, I guess. But in terms of sounds and all that, that's definitely shifted. A lot of my other traits have shifted also. It's just going to be interesting to see if they actually do anything with that. I don't think any of the characters on the show like age or anything, but maybe they'll bring in another autistic character who has different traits, or maybe they'll bring in someone else who's disabled who has a different problem. It's just going to be interesting to see where they take Julia in the future, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
If I had a con about the show, it's that there were too many segments. It was hard to keep up with, which ones were new and which ones were staying. Like, maybe they brought a segment back from 10 years ago or maybe 5 years ago that a lot of people don't remember, or, that no one's ever seen before because maybe they're new to the show. And I could be wrong. Maybe it was just around my time that it was confusing, as in I watched the show, I think, starting from when I was... Man, I had to have been like 3 when I started watching the show, and I think I watched it all the way up until probably middle school or something. But the segments constantly changed all the time, but the one that stood with me was Elmo's World, because it was... I don't think they did it every episode, but they did it enough to the point, and they made it memorable to the point where it kind of just stood out on its own. And I think there were a bunch of like side CDs or DVDs that were associated with Elmo's World. I think there literally are 5 to 10, maybe more CDs that are just about Elmo's World. So, yeah, that was just a segment that completely stood out to me again, just because of everything they did with it. There's so many, it's like a segment within a segment. There's a lot of segments on Elmo's World, but Elmo's World is a segment of Sesame Street. It's just crazy to see where they take everything.
Yeah. I guess one thing that I could add is, and you sort of went over this already, is that they are constantly doing research to see what works with children today, because obviously what worked with children back in 1969 is not just going to automatically work today. So
yeah, good point.
So they're continuously doing research, and that resulted in a few changes. One that I noticed growing up was that originally, like each episode had like a story, and then they had segments sort of thrown in the middle. So like sort of like a commercial break, but it isn't a commercial break because they're educational segments.
Yeah, that's the thing that confused me as a kid, because I'm like, wait, what's going on now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But then later on they changed it to that the whole story sort of segment, it takes place at the beginning. They have a bunch of those educational segments smack dab in the middle, and then they have Elmo's World at the end, and I thought that was probably for the same reason you said, it threw people off, or it was hard for them to keep track of things, so that helped. And then another thing, which I don't know exactly when this happened, but my guess is this has to do with attention spans. They reduced the length of the show, because it previously ran for an hour, now it's back down to a half hour.
Oh yeah, I think you're right. I'm trying to think. I think it's always been a half an hour. I mean, since I was a kid. I mean, I could be wrong. But I think remember my mom saying that she used to binge watch Sesame Street as a kid, because, there were hour-long episodes, and they were so long that you had to, cram, I guess, all the episodes into one day to watch an entire season or whatnot. But yeah, I'm glad they condensed it back down to a half an hour because, I mean, definitely attention spans are a thing. And I don't think I'd be able to sit an hour through all these changing crazy segments. So yeah, I'm thankful for that too. And I think, yeah, what you said made sense because I knew that Elmo's world was somewhere like in almost every show. I'm starting to remember that it was usually towards the end of the episode and then they do that real quick. And I think that was the end of the entire show. So yeah.
And I guess another thing that I just thought of is that this too also made headlines. Apparently, the Sesame Workshop, who produced Sesame Street, they actually inked a deal with HBO. So, and part
That's
of that,
right.
part of that agreement is that new episodes of Sesame Street air on HBO first for 9 months exclusively, and then they're allowed to air on PBS. So it's not off of PBS, but it's now on HBO. And I think part of the reason why they did that and sort of highlighted at the time was that they were able then to produce more episodes than they would if they had stuck with PBS only. So
yeah, and I think that's why Gina Jefferson and Bob Johnson left the show. I think it's because of, like I said, the rebranding that I was talking about. I think this was it, but I'm not entirely sure.
I'm not sure if it was necessarily rebranded for HBO, but I do know that, like a lot of the late night shows, I think at least Jimmy Kimmel, like they mentioned it, and then Jimmy Kimmel, I think he sort of had it cross over with like a bunch of other HBO shows somehow. Like,
oh, interesting.
I would have to see it again. I don't remember exactly what happened, but it was interesting. Yeah.
Although, speaking of celebrities, that also reminds me that there's been a ton of celebrity guest appearances throughout the history of the show. And the most memorable one to me is when Jack Black was on the show and Elmo was showing him a stop sign because Jack Black was trying to look for like shapes, and the one he was looking for was an octagon. And there's this whole, or there used to be, because I think it was recent. I think he went on the show in like 2008 or something, or the late 2000s. But that was around the time when YouTube started to pick up and memes became a thing. And I think that was one of the first memes that ever happened was, the edit of Jack Black and Elmo with the stop sign. And there were like so many like musical remixes and stuff. And of course, me loving memes, it was one of the funniest things, and still is one of the funniest things I've ever seen. So yeah, and a lot of celebrities who have been on the show have obviously made a huge impact with the audiences and the characters, and it's always fun to see celebrity guest appearances on the show because it just makes it like, and I'm sure not just adults but kids, it keeps kids more engaged. They're like, hey, I know that person because they were in another movie I liked and stuff. So I think it's really cool that they include celebrities too.
Yeah, I think this was, I think, back in 2010, I want to say. There was an episode of Sesame Street that had an appearance by Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Yeah. We both can't talk today. It's okay.
I think I was like showing like various different habitats that Big Bird could be in, and then eventually he, of course, said Sesame Street was his home and that's where he's going to stay at the end. But I think one of the reasons why Lin-Manuel Miranda appeared on Sesame Street is because as the year prior, he was in a lot of the segments on the reboot of the Electric Company in 2009, which is also produced by Sesame Workshop. He did a lot of, at least on that show, did a lot of collaborations with Shock, who was like a beatbox. So that was interesting.
Yeah, a lot of the celebrities on the show have made there's some interesting appearances, and then there's those appearances that are just way too memorable, and I think that's, again, one of the many things I love about this show. I'm trying to think. There was one other celebrity guest appearance that I liked, but I totally forgot, who it was. I just remember it being really funny, but yeah, there have definitely been some memorable people on the show.
This one sort of made headlines. I don't know how you're gonna feel about this, but I think it was back again around 2010 when I think it was like 2012 when Sesame Workshop uploaded to YouTube a clip of Katy Perry and Elmo.
I think I remember that now. Yeah, I totally forgot about that one.
Yeah, and then parents commented saying that the dress Katy Perry was wearing was too revealing, and because of that, Sesame Workshop essentially pulled the clip from the episodes that it was supposed to be in. So that sparked a whole discussion in and of itself.
Yeah, I totally remember that too, and I can't believe I forgot about that. Well, I'm kind of glad I forgot, but then I'm glad that you brought it up though, because it is one of those things where there's going to be so many people that are divided over that sort of thing. So I don't really have too much of an opinion on it. Katy Perry is known for wearing kind of revealing outfits, so it doesn't surprise me that she did. I don't necessarily, I can't form a solid opinion about it because I'm not a parent, I don't have a kid who watches the show frequently, and I don't know, if I can't picture myself as a kid, in that position at the moment and what I would think, but I can see why it caused controversy, but again, I don't think I can form a solid opinion about that.
I guess for me, what I would say is that personally, if the target audience, they're probably paying much more attention to the content itself. I forget exactly what it was about, but I know it was a parody of Katy Perry's song "Hot and Cold." Obviously,
that's right.
Obviously, it wasn't the original song; it was an educational parody of it. But honestly, what I guess the adult concerns were about it being too revealing. That's not going to enter their mind at that age unless, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, you do make a really good point too. I don't think a lot of kids would be paying attention to that sort of thing. And even if they did, I don't think they would think it's a big deal. I'm sure they would pay more attention to the song. But, who knows? Again, I'm not a parent. I can't picture myself as a kid in that situation. But yeah, I get why it's controversial, but I personally don't think it's that bad.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not a solid opinion, but yeah, it's hard for me to really, yeah. You get what I'm saying too.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any final thoughts, Rico?
I just think that it's amazing that Sesame Street was able to last 50 years, and I'm hoping it lasts for a longer time yet too.
Yeah, it is amazing to see, and especially a kids show too, to be able to last 50 years. We've heard of cartoons lasting a long time, you got Family Guy and The Simpsons and all these other shows that have lasted a long time, but a kids show lasting this long is pretty impressive. And if I ever have children, I really hope that they watch the show also, because it's that special connection that you can have with, I had that special connection with my mom with this show, and hopefully my kids and I will have the same connection. So this show is just wonderful. And even as an adult, it's fun rewatching the episodes that I watched as a kid, watching the newer episodes and watching again the show becoming more diverse and open and seeing Julia. It really is a show that can keep up with the times, and I'm so thankful for it. And I think that concludes this episode of Beyond the Lens. And I think next time we're talking about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, right?
Right. And hopefully Eric will be back then as well.
Yes, and that will be super fun. So I hope you guys can tune in to listen to that, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Lens. The intro music is Work. That's W-E-R-Q by Kevin MacLeod. It is available under a Creative Commons Attribution License and can be downloaded for free at incompetech.com. Beyond the Lens is a Recore Entertainment production.
But yeah, I am semi-familiar with Mr. Rogers. It's just I don't remember what exactly happened in the show. But I'll definitely do my best.
Mm-hmm. It's honestly, it was a while since I've last seen.
I'm having trouble connecting to the internet.
Well,
take a look at the help section in your Alexa app.
Well, that's strange because I connected to the internet to talk to you. So.